Ninja Moonshine, Middle of the Road, podcast for meeting in the middle. All right, guys, it's Middle of the Road with Ninja and Moonshine, and Moonshine has got an interesting topic for us. What you got, Moonshine?
All right. I hope everybody's had a great week. I hope everybody's doing really well. The gas prices are going down. Everything's just, we're just doing fantastic. And no, we're really not. But it is good to see in some places gas prices down to $3. Speaking of money, I'd like to talk about sports, one of my favorite topics. I'd like to talk about sports logos and sports uh, mascots. I came up with this idea this morning, Ninja, and I was thinking to myself, what better time right now to really kind of go after sports logos and mascots and talk about why they could be offensive to some people, and why do we feel that we need to try to make everyone happy?
Well, I can see where you're going with that, and there's only been, two teams really have changed the name, correct?
Yeah, one was my beloved Cleveland Indians, which are now the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Okay, if they actually called themselves Guardians of the Galaxy, I would call that a win on a name. I'm sorry.
No, they're called Guardians.
Yeah, yeah, but I would switch teams to any team that changed their name to Guardians of the Galaxy, but I'm a giant nerd. That's what I would do.
Well, so I'd like to talk about, let's go with the first of all. Let's talk about Native Americans. I understand the history of our country, and that's a whole that's a whole pot of gumbo right there, of a goulash or stew to get into. The history of our country, we obviously know that the evil white people came over here.
Well, if you
came
think
over
about what
here.
they did, it was kind of evil.
Well, true, it was, but it's kind of the world that we live in today, and even before the pilgrims even arrived on the native land. Can you tell me though how many native tribes destroyed and killed other tribes because they didn't agree with what they were doing, or they destroyed them to make their group of people more prosperous and to have more land?
Well, there's always throughout history to territory disputes, and Native American tribes obviously constantly battle with each other over land and territory. This is true, and the Pilgrims came over, and at first were very cool and chill, like we're taking this little piece of land, and then we get into the whole Western expansion, which is where it got a little shady when we get things like the Trails of Tears and stuff, because there's a difference between arguing over land and having a little bit of battle, and we're gonna be here and you're gonna be here, versus we're gonna send all
Mm-hmm.
y'all to special little camps.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is a difference, but the initial pilgrims and the initial that wasn't their thing. That actually came, years and years later. Like it wasn't the all the people who came originally uh, weren't into the whole Western expansion. I mean, we were only 13 states for a while before we started the whole we're going west and taking everything for ourselves, which was a bit much. But that really doesn't. I mean, that's bad. But the whole sports team thing, I get why they wanted to change some of the names, and I don't get why people are mad about it. So maybe you can
Mm-hmm.
explain.
Well, I've been a Cleveland Indians fan since around 1991. I was born up there, and I just had this yesterday. Uh, I was working, and somebody looked at me and they go, I, I wish I had $1 for every time I've heard this. Uh, where, were you born and raised around here? I said, oh, and then my brain goes, uh-oh, here we go. Um, I was born in I was born in Ohio, And it's usually this Ohio, like I just told them that I don't know, that I just took their children hostage or something. And I said, yeah, I was born in Ohio, and they kind of look at you and they want to kind of pull away and take you out of the club. But anyway, but the point of it is I was born in Ohio between Columbus and Cleveland, and I am a Cleveland fan to a degree. The NBA, I don't know if we've covered much of it, but I am DUN with the NBA for right now and maybe forever. But the Cleveland Indians, that was that those the Cleveland Indians and my Cleveland Browns, that was that was that was a big part of my heart when it comes to sports. Now my Tennessee Vols, that's number one, and then it was the Indians, which have now changed their name to Guardians of the Galaxy, but Guardians, and with the worst logo, and people can actually go look up the logo. It looks like a 6-year-old won a maybe a 7-year-old won a drawing contest. They took a baseball and put it in the middle of two G's, one and made it kind of 3-dimensional. It is absolutely awful. Then they took the C, and it looks like if the Flintstones had a baseball team. So I'm confused, but let me just put it like this. So the Cleveland Indians, again, that was one of my two sports teams, professional sports teams. I've dabbled with the Vegas Knights, and then the Nashville Predators. I lived in Las Vegas, and then being from Tennessee. But the two teams in professional sports would be the Cleveland Indians and the Cleveland Browns.
Right.
And I've had people ask me, they're like, well, what's the big deal about changing a name? And I said, well, what if we changed your name?
Well, if my name was historically inaccurate or offensive to somebody and made to be historically inaccurate and offensive to somebody, I don't think I would mind. And I'm gonna side with you though on the logo. I just had to look it up because honestly, I don't follow baseball.
It's awful.
Oh yeah, no, this is awful. If I was you, I wouldn't be so mad about the name change. It'd be what they did change it to. Because my thing with the Cleveland Indian name and what was it? They had the Chief Wahoo, right? Wasn't that their mascot at one point was Chief Wahoo?
Yes.
Was a absolutely horrible representative of a Native American, and the name Indians in and of itself was so historically inaccurate because it's not. They weren't Indians. They were literally calling them
they weren't Indian.
It was a mistake. So I could see why the team would want to change the name. And the Guardians in and of itself is not a bad name, but you're right. Oh my God, these logos are horrible.
I mean, it looks like the kid that won the contest went out and sold lemonade for like 2 hours on a one street, a one lane street with nobody on the street, and use the money to make the logo.
Yeah, no, you're right. I'm going to give you this logo is absolutely horrible. But at the same time, like, you're mad they changed the name at all. Or not happy with the fact they changed the name at all. And my thing is, with the Indian name, and their mascot, especially the Chief Wahoo, was such a horrible representation of a Native American. I think I understand why they did it.
It was. No, it was. And here's my thing. But before we get there, I would like to have some bit of historical references here of how we got to that point. In 1914, the club owner, Charles Summers, requested the baseball writers choose a new name. They chose, now I'm getting this from, unfortunately, Wikipedia, but Wikipedia can be right. I think this is correct. they they had them choose a new name. They chose the Cleveland Indians, a revival of the nickname that gave. They were the Cleveland Spiders, and they had a Native American player on the team, Louis Lex. I would have thought Louis Running Bear or something, but Alexis. He was a Native American. That's how they got the name of. That's how the team got the mascot and the name, the Cleveland Indians, because there was a player on the team that was Native American.
But they didn't call him a Native American, though. They probably called him an Indian at the time, and he just went with it.
Yeah, well, no, they didn't call. I mean, listen, it was a different world. There was obviously wrongs done. There were wrongs done, and I will always defend the United States of America. We live in a world where everybody wants to make a revisionist. They want to be revisionist. They want to look at the world today and compare it with the world we live in today to where things were back then. And I understand we were still at that time, 1914. You're still 50 or 48 years away from the civil rights movement. You're still, women couldn't vote, this and that. But listen, this is still, and I know this is off subject just a little bit, but this is still such a great country. And obviously, at that time, people didn't have the same sensitivity. And it is good to be sensitive about things, but there was the level of sensitivity that we have today.
Yeah.
So,
well,
go ahead.
I think like the Cleveland Indians name in and of itself maybe necessarily didn't need to be changed. It just changed the mascot and the representation of them. Give it somebody with.
I agree.
With dignity.
I agree completely.
Because the
name
Indians in and of itself, even though historically inaccurate, wasn't so bad. It wasn't as bad as the other team that changed the name. They really did need to change that name. For the other one, they got to change.
Oh, you talking about the Redskins?
Yeah, they needed to change that one. But
I got you.
It was more, I think, the representation of Chief Wahoo, because they made him a joke, and it's like the other Native American based team, the Atlanta Braves. There's always going to be a little stink anytime it's a culture name, but it's one team that they don't get a lot of grief about being the Braves, because being a Brave in the Native American culture was actually an honor. So you're not going to be seeing the Atlanta Braves changing their name anytime soon, because it wasn't a name that was insulting or historically inaccurate. To be a Brave was to be honored amongst your society. You had to earn that title. So I can understand why people wanted to change the name, but I think more it came down to with the Cleveland Indians was the joke they made with Chief Wahoo, because wasn't he like bright red too?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing about that, and I will. Obviously, we're not going to be on the middle of the road on this one, but it's a great conversation that needs to be had. The thing about having a team mascot or a team name, it's not made to make fun at all. Do you know how serious people have? I couldn't tell you, in Ohio and all over the place, have tattoos of Chief Wahoo because they love the Cleveland Indians. That was just how it was. And it's not a sign of disrespect. And then you go to a team like the Redskins, and I'm kind of jumping around here. I'm very passionate about this. In 1933, to honor the Native Americans in general, they had 4 players at the time. People were different back then. It was a different time. Football was a rugged sport. In fact, it was almost illegal in the United States with all the deaths that were a part of American football at the time. So they chose the Redskins. Do you know how many people I've ran into that were Native American when I would go to South Dakota or North Dakota or Oklahoma that were Redskins fans, and they were proud Redskins fans. So it's one of those things, man, where you know we live in a civil society where we there should be civility and there should be respect, but you're not going to make everybody happy. And hell, most of the people that were at the Cleveland Indians games in '95, uh, can you tell I'm passionate about this? In '95, the Indians played the Braves, and there were people out there uh, boycotting the game. They were protesting, all kinds of stuff. And what about the people that, again, were from South Dakota, were from North Dakota, uh, all over the country that were Native American and looked at it as a sign of pride? Uh, the reason why you use Braves, Indians, Seminoles, it's bravery, it's courage, it's somebody out there that you don't want to face. If you take a look at all sports, how many teams out there other than like the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers? How many teams? Because it's a big red blob, or the Stanford Cardinal. And I'm not going to get into. I'll just let you figure out what part of the country Stanford's in, Palo Alto, California. But these mascots are made to be fierce. The Bulldogs. I don't know how fierce a bulldog really is. It's kind of cute, and you want to tickle its belly. Trailer Park Boys. Sorry, if you haven't seen Trailer Park Boys, folks, Trailer Park Boys, tickle its belly. But it, the Falcons, the Giants. Okay, and with that being said, you know where you take like the Guardians. So if a group of kids go to a I can't even hardly say it, Cleveland Guardians game, and they're orphans and they don't have a guardian, should they change the name because it offends orphans, or it offends people that that don't have anybody to care for them?
Okay, well that's we're gonna be in the middle there because I'd be taking it too far. But when we get into the whole Cleveland Indians things, it's historically inaccurate, and the representation of Chief Wahoo was horrible. I understand that people in Cleveland love it and they didn't see it that way, but somebody who wasn't a baseball fan could look at that and go, "Why would you do that?" And it looks bad. Change the name from Indians, I'll go with you on that one because Indians in of itself is historically inaccurate, like I said, but it's not offensive. But the Redskins name was an offensive name. It was the Indian version or the Native American version of the N word originally.
Right.
That'd be like having a team be called like the Chicago N-words, which I won't even say that word because of what it is.
Right.
I'll go with you on Cleveland, but on Washington, it may not have been their intention when they picked that name. They may have been thinking about all the things you said of, but they literally picked a word that was used horribly against Native Americans. And I understand that people became fans and people liked it, but as a whole, that name was, I mean, it was a derogatory word towards them. It's not. It'd be like having the Mexican wet word, which I don't want to say because I'm not trying to get this podcast kicked off the world. So that's not really okay.
People in Denmark right now going, "I swear he said it."
Right, yeah.
And that's probably not a Denmark accent. That's probably more German, but I try.
Yeah, it's so of all the ones who should have been changed, I'll go with you on the Indians. Change the mascot, but leave the Indians alone. As a history person, I'm like, look, I wouldn't want my name to be historically proper, but I can't go with you on the Washington word because of what that word was meant for originally. Nobody, when that word was being said at first, was real happy to be called that because that's what they were, what they were using that word for. It's not okay. I can't be in the mindset of the people who chose that name. It could be exactly what you said. It could have been complete insensitivity. And they fought the chain for a whole long time. And again, the name they picked instead, oh my God, the Commanders, really? The Commanders?
Oh, it's awful.
Oh,
It is so Arena 2 foot. It's not even Arena football. It's Arena 2 football.
like the Washington football team was a better name. I was actually getting to the point where I kind of liked it. Uh, but
It had a Barcelona FC type kind of thing to it.
and again, honestly, if you ask me, calling them the Washington football team was inaccurate because they didn't play like a football team. Never mind, that's just being mean to Washington fans.
That's a little low. Now I want to throw this out to you. Okay, instead of canceling things, why don't we do something like this? Why don't we instead of changing it to the Guardians, why not call them the Cleveland Tribe, which that's what a lot of people called us, was the Tribe. We called ourselves the Tribe. The Cleveland Tribe, you take a percentage of your proceeds of whatever of your you pick it of apparel, hats, shirts, whatever. You take that and I don't know, a half a penny of everything that you sell, a quarter of a penny, a tenth of a penny goes to Native Americans and their communities. Because what's that?
I actually kind of thought Cleveland and Washington both already donated a significant amount. I thought they were already doing that.
Well, no, what I'm saying is instead, why not keep the name and call them the Cleveland Tribe and keep the name and donate a percentage of the money that they bring in as a badge of honor to be called the Cleveland Tribe.
Well, see, and there you go with what I was kind of saying. Like, so much isn't changing their name; it's what they change it to. If they'd been the Cleveland Tribe, I think it would have a long lives. Excuse me. As the Atlanta Braves.
But that's my point, man.
It would have been awesome.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's what pisses me off so much is we're in a cancel culture now where people can't use common sense. They can't figure out that from April to October, you could take every month and you could say, okay, each month we're going to donate a number of money. Listen, hello. We're going to donate a percentage of whatever that we bring in to each month put, like, I don't know, the Cherokee and the Chickasaw. We're going to take two Native American tribes, and each month we're going to donate a percentage, and that month is going to be about them. I mean, it's just people don't use their brains because all they're doing is thinking. They're thinking in a good way, but the road to hell, my greatest quote ever. It should be on my tombstone next to that I like pepperoni, ham, and pineapple. But they should have thought this through and realized what they could have done instead of using their emotion and wanting to cancel everything. Each month would be dedicated to the Iroquois, to the Chippewas, or whatever, and actually stand up and say, okay, well, this didn't go the way we wanted it to, but now we're going to stand behind, and this is going to be something to be prideful about. We're going to donate money because I don't know if you ever heard of Gallup, New Mexico. It is very Native American, and it's arguably it's beyond Dublin, Moscow. It is the drunkest town, the highest concentration of drunk people, maybe in the world, and that's rival with Poland. It's up there. It definitely in the United States. But take the money and do something right instead of wanting to freaking cancel everything. And now I'm on my soapbox and wanting to change. And that's what we're going to talk about next is wanting everybody now to identify as whatever they want to identify. So we want to keep civility, but yet we want to change the way that we look at human beings and categorize them. So I think that's a great segue into
Well,
in a second what we're going to start talking about. But
well,
I'll let you get the last word. I've obviously dominated, but I'm very passionate about it, man. I mean, this was my this was my favorite team. 2016, man. I went to Nashville, in Nashville, drove down to a Buffalo Wild Wings, went there, went inside, and everybody was Cubs fans. Everybody. And it was the Cleveland Indians versus Chicago Cubs. I went in there and nobody was a Cleveland Indians fan. This team meant a lot to me, and it broke my heart as a I'll be in my mid 40s in December. As a mid 40-year-old man, it broke my heart because I love this team that much.
but here's my thing. I agree with what you're saying. The cancel culture has gotten far out of control, but they didn't actually cancel the team. All they did was change the name. It sounds like you don't wholly disagree with them changing their name from the Indians, because even you said call them Cleveland Tribe, which is a more honorific name than something that was inaccurate. So it sounds like to
Yeah.
me your problem so much isn't that they changed the name; it's what they changed it to, and then they didn't honor their heritage.
No,
Or am
no.
I,
My point is that they changed the name to something completely stupid instead of staying with the same Native American tone and actually honoring Native Americans and just jumping in with everybody else.
yeah.
Just the cancel culture.
Yeah, and I actually agree with that. When they could have gone with a Cleveland Native American based name that was more appropriate rather than the Indians and or the Washington Redskins, and then continue to honor and do exactly what you said, that would have actually made more sense. My question would come down to on the name change, okay? Because obviously you didn't mind them changing the name from Cleveland Indians to something more Native American honorific. Is how did they pick the name?
There are, and I'm not from Cleveland. My parents were married there. My brother was born outside of Cleveland. I was born more between Columbus and Cleveland in a city called Mansfield. But anyway, there's statues over one of the bridges in Cleveland, if I have this correct, and they are guardians. They're huge statues of guardians over the city, and it's pretty cool.
So they went
But
with the name to honor the
golly,
city.
yes, I get it. I completely understand. But you just took away over 100 years of history.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I'm with and the fact that you're not so mad about the name change is what they did. As I can actually, I can meet you in the middle on that one and agree. So there
Well,
you go.
let me say this to you, Chris. So I'm a University of Tennessee football fan, sports fan. Excuse me. I'm all over Tennessee sports. I don't care if it's badminton.
Right. So you're very sad.
But yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, easy there, Buttercup. Tennessee last year and this year actually had the highest winning percentage in the SEC for all men's sports.
Really, I
So
honestly did not
yeah,
know that. I don't follow
that's
college
in.
football or follow sports a lot at all. I and please take no offense because I live in Kentucky in the
You
land
know,
of
I'm not going to be offended. I'm the last person to be offended.
in the land of UK and U of L basketball, and
Definitely.
I literally tell these people the same exact jokes, making fun of their teams. If I'm talking to a UK fan, I make it a UK joke, and if it's a U of L fan, I say U of L instead of UK. And nobody around here likes me because of it.
But the point of that was though, is that I went to Middle Tennessee, not as a student. I just went there as a non-preferred walk-on for football in 2001. I sat there in the graduate assistant's office in 2001, and he was talking about how much bigger MTSU, Middle Tennessee State University, was going to be than Tennessee. Tennessee is one of the oldest institutions in college sports. It started right around when it's right after Georgia. I mean, one of the oldest institutions in sports. there is so many generations of Tennessee fans.
Oh yeah.
And so my point is this: you have now taken the Guardians, you've started all over. I know you keep the name, blah blah blah, you keep the history, but you started over. You've completely started over. You have no tradition now. We still do have the tradition, but we don't have the name. Nobody, the Guardians. And I mean, that's what you've done. You have removed all that tradition and history, and now we're we're the Guardians. And what you've done is you've made the University of Tennessee into I don't say in all respect because I'm not respecting it. It's just there's no near anywhere near the fan base, not even close to what Tennessee is compared to MTS, what MTSU is compared to Tennessee. Um, Real quick, Ninja, I wanted to say, and I know I'm dominating today, but I think people will enjoy this podcast because I'm fired up. There are 5.2 million American Indians and Alaskan Natives making up 2% of the U.S. population. So if you remove the Alaskan Natives, I get you could put them in there, I guess. There are 14 states with more than 100,000 American Indian or Alaskan Native residents. Okay, I've talked to Native Americans about this before. They are dwindling away, and it's going to become something like where they're not going to, they're more than likely not going to be a part of the future to a degree. What it is when you have these teams like the Seminoles, it's honoring the warriors of this land's history.
And when we get to
So you may not agree with it.
well, no, when you get to the thing where the names that are honoring, I haven't heard a lot of stink about them changing their names. I haven't heard anybody talking about changing the Seminoles. I haven't really heard, okay, a little bit with the Braves, but not much. It seems like the names that are honoring, they're leaving alone. Nobody felt, well, not nobody, a lot of people felt that the name of the Indians and the name of the Washington team weren't honoring the Native Americans. I agree with you on changing, they should have changed the name, but found a way to change the name to something that would have kept honoring the Native Americans. Like you said, the Cleveland Tribe. That would have been a really awesome name because that would have been honoring them. Washington, well, the Washington football team is such a disaster in the front office. They should just be actually defranchised, and that team should be sold.
I mean, yeah, Snyder, which is the owner of the team, he hasn't exactly Daniel Snyder. He's a businessman. He's done pretty poorly. You just mentioned something, and I wanted to hit on this. You said that you don't know of any teams that didn't have an offensive name that have been removed or people had an issue. Well, actually, I have one. It was one of the coolest names ever. It was the North Dakota Fighting Sioux. That was the name of their sports teams at the University of North Dakota. They changed it to the Fighting Hawks of all things. And I'm such a sports fan, I can tell you right now, you take the Arkansas State is a smaller school than the University of Arkansas Razorbacks. They used to have a Native American name. They changed it to, and I just had it in my head here, Arkansas State. It's the Red Wolves. And that seems to be the thing everybody goes with. Why Red Wolves? If you take a look at all the teams that have changed their names, it seems to go that route. The Red Wolves. Okay, why red and why wolves?
Well, I can tell you the red part, and that's why the names are probably getting changed. Red was literally used as a slur against them. That's where the Redskins came from.
Well, that's the name they have now. I was talking about before they had a Native American name.
Yeah, the red was calling somebody a red or a redskin or was actually derogatory. It was originally meant like that was a bad thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, I agree with that. And again, I'm I'm not I'm definitely not saying that we haven't done things in our history, but you go back to um, go to all countries in the world. They've all used derogatory names towards people that were different than the conquerors, and that's exactly what we were. We were conquerors. Uh, China that we know today, Japan. Nobody just came out of the ground. Uh, then you go back to biblical times, but the people that are in these places have went there and dominated a group of people or a nation to achieve where they are now. And I always bring that up to people. And by the way, Chris, I've screwed this whole podcast up. I'm sorry, Chris Ninja. If you want to restart, we can.
No, we're good.
But
You just keep rolling, man. It's good stuff.
yeah, dadgummit, I caught it in like the 18th time I said it. But what I'm doing there is I'm passionately speaking with you, so I'm trying to get inside the inner you legally. Okay, that sounded good, didn't it?
Whoa.
But did you know that Native Americans own we could do a whole, and I want to, maybe next week, we can do a whole podcast on Native Americans owned tens of thousands or more white, native, and black slaves.
Yeah.
Everybody's played their part in atrocities in history.
Oh yeah, no, and we can talk about that, but every nation, everybody, nobody's perfect. None of the nations perfect. I mean, some of the African slaves that were brought to America were actually given to us by the African tribes, where they sold people they didn't like.
Oh, how dare you, ninja! How dare you say that?
It's historically accurate. And then we got to the point where we just started taking the ones we wanted anyway. But the original slave trade, I mean, that's what it was. Didn't make it right.
No, absolutely not.
But yeah, but they don't do it anymore. We don't do it anymore, and we recognize it as a stain on us, and they probably recognize it as a stain on themselves. Just like when you go over to Germany and go, so how about that Hitler? And they all just kind of go, Can we not? We know we messed up. Can we not talk about that?
No, actually, you can go to jail for that kind of speech.
Yeah, like they're like, okay, look, we know we messed up. We've made amends. Please leave it alone. And and that's it.
Yeah, honestly, bro, they don't say please. They don't have the First Amendment like we do here. Yeah. You can be in prison for hate speech for using that kind of language.
Well, if you use it as hate speech, if you literally went over and try to have a historical conversation, you wouldn't get in trouble. But yeah.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't. That's not the last thing I'm thinking of when I'm in Germany.
No, when I go to Germany, I'm going to Germany. I'm going in October, and I'm hitting the sausage and the beer. That's what I'm doing. But every single country.
How stereotypical of you,
dude. That's what Oktoberfest is. That's
stereotypical. So you're basically just saying that I have a little bit of German blood in me, and all we are good for is Wieners and beer.
Oh no, y'all are good for lots of things. I'm just saying if
there's no y'all, there's a little bit, not y'all.
I'm just saying if I'm going to Germany, I'm going during Oktoberfest. That's when I'm going. And I'm going to go to the beer tent, and I'm going to get some of the authentic German bratwurst, which are amazing. And I'm going to be drunk and full of sausage. And that sounds horrible, but whatever. That's what I'm doing.
It really does.
I was just saying, I'm going to be drunk and full of sausage. It is going to be wonderful. And I'm going to be like thankful to the German people for inventing bratwurst, because it's like my favorite food. And it's no insult. Just like if I'm going to go to China, I'm going to go on the Chinese New Year, which is different than ours, and go for that celebration. Yeah. That's what I'm doing. If I go to another country, I'm going to go when it's an event. Unless I'm going to like Italy, then I'm going to Rome just to see the Colosseum any time of the year, just because that's always going to be awesome. But
nice.
Back to our original topic, sports names.
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to talk a little bit about transgender, but I think we could stay on this and just talk about transgender athletes another day, but
Well, if you want to go ahead and hit on it,
what
we
do
can
you?
hit on it.
Yeah, well,
I mean, I just said I was full
you,
of
you know,
sausage.
well, you know how, you know how wow, you know how, you know how passionate I am. So we've been on here now right at 45 minutes. So I think we should just stay on, um, really, and kind of talk about the logos. So you have the Chicago Blackhawks.
Yeah.
A lot of people, and here's the thing, Ninja. The people that have the biggest issue with these logos and these names tend to be ding, 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 white liberals. Because, and I know that is that you may not like that, but it's absolutely true. Absolutely true. They're the ones that have the biggest issues for anything. And with that being said, I mean, you have the Blackhawks, the Chicago Blackhawks, one of the coolest logos out there. And from what I understand, the Blackhawk Nation is behind them because there there is no slander, there's no way around it to say, hey, you're making us look bad. It's the Blackhawks.
Yeah, no,
It is a yeah.
it was like, and it's a normal skin tone when you look at it. It's not something ridiculous like the Chief Wahoo was bright red.
Right, I agree. I agree.
And again, it's one of those things like the Blackhawks. They're honoring them, so I don't think there has been a Giants thing. And even talking about changing the logo a little bit, they were going to go to like this bird logo, and even it has it's done up like a headdress. It actually looks really cool. Um, so I don't see them changing yet. Look, you're never going to make everybody happy, but
Never.
I don't see the Blackhawks changing their logo or their name ever, because
Well,
they even have the colors correct for honoring the headdress of the Blackhawks.
we'll take a look at, like, you can't say the M word. There's so many words out there now that have M or word connected to it.
Yeah.
You can't call little people midgets anymore.
Right.
So what about if I'm a little person and I go to a New York Giants game or a San Francisco Giants game and I'm offended because I'm not big? You know what I mean? Or um, what if you go to a Seattle Seahawks game, and that is Seattle, and you can take a guess on what my feelings on that city is. But you go to an Atlanta Falcons game, and you have a fear of birds. I mean, it could go on and on and on.
Okay, but here's where the difference comes in, and this is where I feel like a lot of people on the right side get a little exaggerating. Because I understand what you're saying. What if somebody's offended? But there's a difference between a name that is completely offensive, like the Redskins, which was a derogatory
Mm-hmm.
name, versus
Sure.
I'm scared of birds, so you can't call your teams the Falcons, or I'm a short person, so I don't like the name the Giants. That's that's beyond the pale of reason being reasonable. And if you notice, the only teams that have changed their name are the two teams that, okay, besides the one college team I did not know about because I didn't know about
North Dakota Sioux, the Fighting Sioux.
the Fighting Sioux, um, uh, were the names that could be considered offensive. And honestly, what made the Indians name offensive wasn't so much the name; it was the Chief Wahoo. Um, I like your idea of the Cleveland Tribe. I think that's a perfect name. Were the
Yeah,
ones that
well,
changed.
that's going away.
Yeah,
That's
it's God. But like you said, like the Blackhawks, again, nobody seriously is considering changing them. There's no major protest. Is there always going to be a couple Karens and a couple idiots? Yes, there always is. There's going to be protests about everything. Like, I'm not a big fan of what happened with Roe versus Wade. We've talked about that. But what happened with Brett Kavanaugh this week was ridiculous. The boy was trying to sit down with his family and have dinner, and the protest chased him out the back of the diner. That's crazy. The man made a decision. We can like it, not like it, whatever, but the man should be allowed to sit there and eat dinner. So, but but the protest for like the Blackhawks, there really isn't any. There isn't really a major protest for the Atlanta Braves. The only thing they keep getting the Braves for is doing the tomahawk chop because some Native Americans are saying that's offensive. I don't know why that one's offensive,
Well,
but
the Seminoles have permission. Florida State has permission from the Seminole tribe.
yeah,
There is another school, the Syracuse Orangemen, and growing up they were the Orangemen. Now they're just the Syracuse Orange, which makes no sense. They are the Syracuse Orange, but growing up they were the Syracuse Orangemen. They had to change their name because they said it was offensive to Native Americans. And up in the New York area, there are a lot of Native American tribes.
yeah, and that would come down to the question. Because I hadn't heard about this one, so I hadn't looked it up, so I don't know. Was that actually used as an insult to them at one point to call them orange, to call them the Orangemen?
Not that I know of.
I mean, if you go back historically, could we find? I mean, we can look that up later and talk about it on a different podcast. But if a name was ever used as an insult, I can see why they want to change it. The Indians, not historically accurate, so they wanted to change it. Redskin, flat out an insult. But you get the Blackhawks, you get the Braves, you get all these other names that are insults. And yes, there's always going to be the one or two far left crazy people who don't want to change it, but it's not going to. There is no, like, there was a massive pressure campaign for Washington to change their name. There were organizations and companies, and everybody was pressuring them. And there's not zero, but 1% of that, if that, going against the Braves, going against Blackhawks, and nobody's taking them seriously. And that's the beauty of our nation, that just because something is found offensive by some people, unless it's a massive press, a lot of times it just does get ignored, thank God. The day we become what you're afraid of, or what you're talking about, where like, oh, I'm a little person, so I'm offended by the Giants name, we're going to change that just because 5 people got offended or 10 people got offended, hasn't come yet. If it does, I will be right there fighting with you, because that's no longer freedom of speech and freedom of America. But I don't think we're going to get to that point.
Well, the Washington football team had a chance to change their name to the Washington Red Tails, which was paying homage to the Tuskegee Airmen.
Yes, and that would have been great.
That would have been an amazing name, the Red Tails.
Oh, and they just both. Oh, excuse me. Go ahead, take over for a second. Oh, you didn't take over a second while I was coughing and dying. I muted it so it wouldn't. Oh,
well, I didn't know what in the hell you were talking about.
Oh no, I started to choke. I
know. I was starting to wonder, like, does he mean take over and just talk for 10 minutes or something? Or but the Red Tails, they had an opportunity there to be the Red Tails, to honor the Tuskegee Airmen, which was the first aviation crew, the first fighting aviation crew in American history.
And weren't they almost undefeated?
What's that?
Weren't the Red Tails undefeated? Like, they always came back from battle winners? Like,
yeah, they were. I don't have the specifics right in front of me, but they definitely laid the ground to be well known and respected. But I mean, it just I don't agree with what you're saying on the let's have common sense. If we're having common sense, then a kid in Iowa is not going to identify himself as a cat. And here's the thing: there's been people before that identified themselves as a cat, and they were institutionalized.
Yeah.
Now we're actually welcoming this and saying, okay, well, let's go ahead and put a litter box in the bathroom. And my question on that is, who changes the litter box? I mean, it's just absolutely, we are not in a position now to where I can hear you say, well, let's just use common sense, because people are no longer using common sense.
Well, most people are. You're never, ever going to get everybody on the planet to use common sense. Common sense, unfortunately, isn't common. But as a whole, as a nation, for the most part, we are using common sense. Or we're operating on the assumption if that's what you want to do and it's in your house and you're not bothering nobody, who cares?
Yeah, but when you start pushing it on other people,
Well, and
that's the problem.
that would be the problem. But here's my thing, because you're getting to the cat thing. That's the transgender thing. Is if somebody wants to identify as a female and they're willing to go so far as to cut off their junk in order to be female,
Mm.
and that's what they want to be called. But you know what? Okay, I'll call you a female. It doesn't hurt
But
me in any way, one way or the other, to call you a female. And if you've gone to the point where you've removed your organ, where you no longer have a penis, and you want to use the female bathroom, go ahead.
well, you can no longer call people ma'am or sir. There's a video that has went beyond viral where a transgender person is in
GameStop.
a GameStop, and he's got this kid, he or she or whatever, has got this kid so flustered he keeps saying "sir," and he goes absolutely nuts and starts kicking stuff and all over the place.
If that guy, or sir, or ma'am, or the ma'am, it was a ma'am, because that's what they wanted to be, which is fine. He ended up getting arrested for vandalism.
Amen to that.
So I get what you're saying, where that person was going crazy. That person wasn't applying common sense. Because look, I have a slightly female voice. It comes off sometimes. I sound like a female. Whatever. I don't care. I know I'm a dude. Life goes dude. I've been called ma'am on the phone. I've been called ma'am on drive-through. Nobody, when they see me, says ma'am. But when they hear my voice, sometimes they say ma'am. Am I a little perturbed? Sure, because I'm not a man. But I don't let it destroy my whole day, and I'll correct them and move on, or I'll just go with it. Sometimes I did this as a joke. I went through a drive-through, and they said ma'am, so I full on put on a female voice and did a southern accent, did all this stuff, and then when I went up there, I went, "What up, dude?" Just to mess with them. The look on their face was priceless. So there are always going to be those outliers, and that person who destroyed a GameStop was absolutely ridiculous and was an outlier. But as a whole, it's not that bad yet. And I don't think we will get to that point.
Yes. I think we are.
Because this almost goes into what we're going to talk about. I'm going to hit on just for a second. Because I understand what you're saying about transgender athletes not being allowed to compete in sports based on what they want to be, right? So the Olympics came up with a plan, which was a common sense plan. If you did a hormone test and you had the equivalent hormones of the gender you wanted to compete as, they let you do it. Because at that point, hormonally speaking, there is no more advantage. There was no longer the boosted testosterone or going from male to female. You were presenting your body completely as female at that point, so they let them compete in the female sports. So if you've gone that far, that's the common sense solution. Now,
but then what about these high school students now, to where they're not even okay? So what you're saying there is, in high school, if you are not taking hormone therapy or doing anything like that, and you clearly have an advantage, then you should definitely not be able to compete against people that are clearly disadvantaged.
Exactly. There was a common sense solution to that problem, and the Olympics found it. If you are not hormonally the same, then you can say you want to be female and you can be treated as a female, but you can't compete in a female sport till you're hormonally the same as a female in that sport.
Well, it goes back to, so you take this swimmer, and I don't have all of the information in front of me. All I can say is that damn near the entire association of female swimmers were coming out in the NCAA and disagreeing with this girl coming in there, and I called her a girl. Yeah. This man coming in there and being transgender and coming in there and dominating the sport. Where on the men's side, he wasn't even anywhere close to being on the level that he competed as a female.
No, and
So
I would say throw the test at him, and if she, I'm gonna call her she because that's what she wants to be called. If she isn't hormonally the same, then no, out. Period. Like that, and that's where the common sense has to come in. That's where the thing is. I agree that if you have that advantage, you should not be allowed to compete. Just like they had that UFC fighter that transitioned from male to female, but hadn't done all the tests and all the hormones, like, and almost, I mean, destroyed a female fighter. And it wasn't even close. It was ridiculous. So there is a way to make it work. Are they going to do that? No. They're probably just going to, in high schools, flat out ban. And then we get the whole transgender thing right now where they're actually, states are passing laws saying you can't give somebody under the age of 18 the hormone therapies. Because they say they're not.
I agree with that one. I had somebody the other day, and you shouldn't really take too much into it when you're talking to somebody that you can't see, you can't watch their lips move, you don't know exactly who they are. They told me that when I said I didn't agree with young children at 5 years old deciding if they're a male or female, and they said, well, what age did you decide? What age did you know you were male or female? And I wouldn't even respond to that.
Well,
Let me tell you something. There is no way in the world, if you give a 5-year-old kid the opportunity or the option to decide at 5 years old if they are a male or female, there is no way in the world that that could be right. No possible the world possible way.
Because they don't even understand. And
they don't even understand anything.
But I wasn't talking about prepubescent, because I agree with you on that one. But if you're in high school, right, and you've made that decision, I do think there's a certain age when you can make that decision. That's before you get out of high school, but after that, there is a middle of the road. That could be me. And I agree with you. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old. I got a son right now. He's 10. If he came down and said, I want to be a female dad, I'd be like, cool. I mean, if you want me to treat you one and act like one, that's cool. We're going to do that. We'll do that for a while. But I'm not going to do any chemically altering things to you. That's ridiculous. We'll wait till you're older to make that decision. But at the same time, my kid's 10. He doesn't even understand really what the difference other than different parts. That's all he knows. That's
it. And there should not be drag queens. And I think we talked about this before. If it's the parents' decision, then I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
But if it's a school function, I am 1,000%, 1,000,000% against that.
And I looked up online. I did a news search on that one because I was curious, and I found 0 drag queen events at schools that were mandatory.
Okay, then we're good.
Like,
then if it was it's just the fact is, okay, but how many did you find to where, and I know this is, but we don't, you know me, I definitely don't. I don't stutter step around the controversial stuff. People want to hear about that and talk about that. They at least want to hear about it. They may not want to talk about it. But when it comes to gay pride, that should not be connected. Sexuality should not be connected as a school function at all. I understand sex ed and stuff like that, but when you're at school, you're there for class. You're there to learn, to be educated about school. You're not there, and some of these states, they do whatever they want with your kids. They won't even allow you to come get your kids. That ain't how school was supposed to be made up.
Well, now
school was supposed to be made up to educate children.
And part of education is history. So here's my question to you now. I understand what you're talking about slightly different, but I want to see if we can meet middle of the road somewhere on this one, because I agree, pride events forced by the school, bad, because what if you're not? I get that.
And you can look that up, and it was.
I don't know. I have no doubt on that one. But here's my question. At one point, because at one point being gay was illegal. We actually,
Okay.
there's laws on the books at one point that made being gay 100% illegal, right?
There's still states that sodomy is illegal.
Well, that was, yeah, now that is a thing. Yeah, it's back now because that was part of Roe versus Wade.
Well, no, it was illegal
not
in
Roe versus Wade,
Alabama.
in Alabama, yeah.
And other states, it's
So-
always been illegal.
So, and there was actually, it's a different case. Supreme Court, because Clarence Thomas was overturned. We talked about it. They were to make it illegal again. At one point, as American history, because there has been landmark things that affected just the gay community, does it become a historical education?
Absolutely. Nothing wrong with historical. But when you go out and you're doing a walker, it's all over YouTube and all the social media stuff, TikTok, where teachers are parading the kids around celebrating Gay Pride Month. That is wrong. That is completely wrong.
It should, if they want to do that, this should be a voluntary basis, because not everybody want to do that.
And do you know how many parents didn't even know about this?
Well, that's on the parents for not knowing. Like,
well, no, it's on the education system to inform them what they're actually teaching their kids.
Well, that's just it. Like, as somebody who has a kid in school, right? I get a newsletter every week telling me exactly what they're doing that entire week. I know. Mm-hmm. If the school's not doing that, then that's on the school. But you know how many parents don't even look at those newsletters? They don't bother?
No, well, I got you.
Yes, it's on the school, but it's also at the same time on the parent. I got one for you. Talk to your kid. Your kid will tell you. I mean, unless your relationship with your kid is that bad, which then you have a whole nother problem, and that's a podcast in and of itself.
Right.
Talk to your kid. Like, I'm sorry, any parent goes, well, I didn't know my school was doing that. You know what? You should have. Because I promise you, if you went to the school's website, if you looked at the school's newsletter, if you just had a conversation with your child, you would have known.
But we can't educate on the lackluster parents out there. We can't educate on
and my point with that one is
they're not doing and not being involved. This needs to be an overall general way of teaching.
It does need to be much more standardized education. But anytime they try to do that, everybody always argues because everybody has a different ideal. But my thing is, I agree with you. It should not be forced to be in a parade if you don't want to and all that stuff. You're right. We're middle of the road on that one. I agree with you totally.
Well, they shouldn't do it in the first place because you know as well as I do how influential and how cruel. Man, kids are the cruelest thing ever. And if you're not involved in what the other kids are doing, then it becomes a Twitter world where, okay, now you're mocked and you're treated like a bastard because you're not involved in the trendy train of the week.
But that's just it. In most of the schools that are doing that, almost every kid would want to be involved. Because I guarantee you, no school in Tennessee is doing that. My thing is everything should be an option, but it shouldn't be forced in the class. So if they wanted to do a gay pride event from a school, right? I get what you're saying with the trendy train and all that, but it should have been an after-school thing for the kids who wanted to do it. That way, there's representation for those kids who wanted to participate that event.
It shouldn't, but the thing about it again is,
I'm saying not during school hours.
When you're not involved in this stuff, well, how does it look to the other kids? Then you're going to be forced. How many kids that were involved really didn't want to be involved, but they didn't want to be looked at, and be made fun of?
But that's part of high school life, even beyond the whole gay thing.
I'm talking about middle school and elementary school, most of them.
Well, in
elementary school, developmental years.
Elementary school years, it shouldn't even, anything in sexual whatever shouldn't be in elementary school at all. Middle school,
amen,
is when you should actually start teaching a little bit. I think sex ed needs to start sooner. I think it actually should be in middle school, but not like the 6th grade. That should be probably starting the 7th and 8th grade. So it should be a part of it. But when it comes to the alternate lifestyles, they have to be mentioned, because whether we agree with it or not, which I'm with the I don't care. But it should be normalized. That way, if somebody is different, they're not made fun of just for being different. And I think that's what the schools are going for, and some people take it too far. And
what
that's
we're doing is we're trying to. Civil society is based off of whether people agree with it or not. You cannot argue. Civil society is based off of a man and a woman household parenting a household. That's just how it works. That's a civil society that procreates human beings. There's just no way around it. And when you get two mothers and you get two fathers in a household, okay, that's your right. But it can never be the norm. And if we have people that are dressed up and look, I mean, listen, if you want to do whatever you want to do, but you can't expect people to take you serious or think you look beautiful, because you're a 50-year-old man with a damn wig and lipstick on his face. You look like an absolute fool. And there's no way in the world that we can normalize these things and be a civil society. And with that being said, I think we should leave them wanting more.
I'm going to disagree with you on that we can still be a civilized society as long as everybody is civil. But we can hit that topic a little bit harder another day. And you're right, we've been over an hour. I didn't even realize. It's such good conversation. I did not realize. So we'll wrap it up, and we'll talk more next week on Middle of the Road with Ninja and
Moonshine. And the guy Chris, that's I've been drinking last night. So.
Hey, we all had a little bit of drink. All right, guys. Everybody have a good week. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed that show. And all the others on the Ninja Podcast Network. We have Angry Ninja Presents Not a Kid's Game, the currently defunct D&D podcast, but hopefully more episodes coming soon. The Ask the Angry Ninja Show podcast, Chris Allen's audio stories, where I read you some stories I wrote. And if you have a story you want to hear that you wrote, send it to me and I will read it. Middle of the Road with Ninja and Moonshine podcast about a guy from the left and a guy from the right coming together and meeting in the middle. The Ninja News and Politics Show, Outrageous Stories with the Angry Ninja, and Sports Talk with Ninja and JMO. And if you want to support the funny, support any of the shows, patreon.com/worstjokes. Come support the funny. If you want to reach out to us, at cman2342 on Twitter, or just get on Facebook, search for the Ask the Angry Ninja Show. You'll find our page. Ask us a question. Or if any of that's too much for you, you can just send us an email at asktheangryninja@gmail.com, and we will answer your question. Hope everybody enjoyed the show. You guys have a wonderful day.